The Interpreter, 14th of March 2024, Vietnam-Australia, a Chinese-made partnership? Following last week's announcement that their strategic partnership, SP, would be expanded to a comprehensive strategic partnership, CSP, Australia and Vietnam marked 6 years of better relations since the SP was first announced in 2018. Since the Vietnam War, ties between the two middle-sized countries in the Indo-Pacific have improved significantly. Instead of committing to mutual defense, SPs bind partners to increased collaboration on common concerns and interests across various fields. Expanded partnerships, CSPs, are agreements beyond SPs and usually include a military component. Under both the Labour and Liberal governments, Australia has made a concerted effort to strengthen its Asian ties, which includes the CSP with Vietnam. By the time the Morrison government left office, there were 10 SPs with Asian countries, up from 8 during the Rudd government in 2008. Two recent examples are a strategic alliance with the Philippines in 2023 and extensive strategic collaborations with South Korea and ASEAN in 2021. China and Australia inked a CSP in 2014. These relationships are flexible enough to start with one set of objectives and serve entirely different ones. One of these goals is to reduce risk in Australia's relations with China. Australia received an invitation from Japan to the G7 meeting in Hiroshima in July 2023. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese notably supported a G7 joint statement emphasizing the necessity of de-risking trade relations with China. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, gave a landmark address in March 2023 that kicked off the conversation about de-risking by advocating for de-risking rather than decoupling as Beijing entered a new era of security and control. Since then, the phrase has been more prominent in U.S. strategic discourse, with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan advocating for de-risking and diversification to enable U.S. companies to compete successfully with China. One country's gradual attempt to reduce the risks associated with its economic interdependence with another is known as de-risking. Conversely, decoupling is the abrupt and total severing of economic connections, which may be detrimental to both parties. De-risking, however, has varying connotations depending on one's perspective. Some consider it a plausible tactic to expand strategic options and shield economies. Some perceive it as merely decoupling under a different name. The proposed ministerial dialogue on energy and minerals to drive cooperation in energy and resource sectors, including in critical minerals supply chains, is the most apparent sign of de-risking in the Australia-Vietnam CSP. The CSP aligns with recent actions taken by Australian Strategic Minerals and Blackstone Minerals to invest in Vietnam's substantial critical mineral resources, considered the second largest in the world, after China, at 22 billion tons. Vietnam is increasingly choosing to purchase LNG and coal from Australia. While both countries have pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, Australia wants to be the first to support Vietnam's just energy transition, which strikes a compromise between net zero and the country's goal of being fully developed by that year. The Albanese administration intends to give Hanoi the natural resources, infrastructure, expertise, and technical capacity to meet its long-term objectives by implementing Invested, Australia's Southeast Asia economic strategy for 2040. De-risking will also improve higher education. Australia's universities find Vietnam profitable for attracting students as they diversify and lessen their reliance on China and India. Nearly 33,000 Vietnamese students were enrolled in Australian universities in 2023, a 46% rise from 2022. In comparison, China's growth rate was just 6%, probably due to internal factors and the tensions brought on by several diplomatic issues during the COVID-19 outbreak. Open sea lanes are necessary for de-risking trade between Australia and Vietnam, but China's militarization of the South China Sea has jeopardized this. In addition to strengthened commitments to intelligence sharing and collaboration on maritime security, the yearly Australia-Vietnam Security Dialogue has been elevated to the ministerial level. This will enable Australia and Vietnam to more accurately anticipate future disruptions to maritime trade brought on by escalating tensions in the South China Sea. The 2 decades of confidence building between the Australian and Vietnamese military form the foundation of these promises to enhance cooperation on maritime security. Limited training between Australia's and Vietnam's fleets and special forces is possible under the 2009 Memorandum of Understanding on Defence Cooperation and the 1999 Defence Cooperation Program. Vietnam does not, however, share Australia's aim to de-risk its relations with China, even if the two countries have signed a CSP promising stronger economic and security cooperation. Last year, Hanoi announced additional agreements on infrastructure, political cooperation, and marine security in addition to endorsing China's Community of Common Destiny. Hanoi has strengthened its CSP with Beijing to allay concerns over expanding ties with the U.S. due to Vietnam's neutrality and historical inclination to ensure peaceful relations with Beijing. Therefore, Australia shouldn't assume that the CSP means that Vietnam and Australia are closely aligned on handling China. As international businesses progressively flee the Chinese market in search of friendlier coasts, Vietnam recently signed CSPs with the US, Japan, and South Korea, emphasizing increased infrastructure, investment, and trade links.